Hello and welcome back to Garry's Garage, and on what is one of the hottest days of the year so far, I'm going to be melting two bits of metal together and welding the bulkhead in. Those of you who were watching last time will have seen that I mostly got this bulkhead panel in the right place. I've done a little bit more fettling off camera. I noticed that this front lip here was sitting a little bit askew, so I've had it off and trimmed it up and levelled it all out a bit. So now's time to drag the welder over, get some thicker, heavier clothes on in this really hot weather. It's about 28 degrees, which is pretty unheard of in the UK, and we don't have air conditioning. It's just not a thing, so yeah, it's super hot for us, you know, when we're usually used to about 10 degrees. So let's get some different clothes on, drag the welder over and start tacking this into place. That is this now tacked in, and it's reasonably solid other than just this little bit here, which will be filled in once that lower bulkhead is built up to it. So it's just tacked in all around the edge, so what I need to do now is run down and fill it in. Okay, so after what seems like quite a while of welding and a bit of grinding, these joins along the edges and along the top of the windscreen are pretty much done. Just got a few more little spots along here that just need filling in, and then just the heads on those ground back, but all of this is looking pretty good. Probably need a little skim of body filler over just a few of these to decided to try to smooth this in rather than leave the welded edge on there. So yeah, a little bit of body filler on there should just smooth that off and make that look a bit nicer. So the next thing to look at is securing this front. So it's tacked just under here, which is holding this bit in place. So I need to make up a fill-in piece to tie between where I've cut the bulkhead here, underneath, and up here to get that all in nice and solid. So that will be the next thing to do. bit more fettling. I've got a repair panel, mostly the right size and shape for in here, so that's just clamped up to the hole there that it's going to cover. That's the old heater inlet. So I can now start tacking that into place and just shaping it to match what's there, and then that should tie in the new piece of bulkhead to everything else that's in the car. So I'll get back on the welder again. I am going to consider that welded. There is a little bit of tidying up that still needs to happen, like a bit of seam sealer around the joins just to make it extra waterproof, and a little bit of body filler just to smooth in some of the transitions and some of these joins. But it's looking a lot better than it was, and now I'm not going for totally original 100% show car, so the odd little minor imperfection here and there I'm not too concerned about at the moment. Really, at the moment I just want to get it back together and start to use it again. So I think the next thing to do will be, well, firstly tidy up my garage, because it is an absolute state. There is grinding dust and various other things all over the place. But the next thing I think is going to be some seam sealer and some body filler, which I don't have, so I will need to go and acquire those, and by the time I am back in a second I will have them. So we have some seam sealer, some P38 body filler, or bog as the Australians call it, and a little bit of P40 or fiberglass repair just in case I need it. So the next thing to do will be go down some of the seams with the seam sealer, but I think before that I'm going to get the engine back up on the crane and see if I can get it in the hole without having to fold up this lip, because I think it will look really nice if I can get away without folding the lip up again. So let's drag the engine back in place. So it's in, and there's actually a little bit of clearance there. Maybe I can get my finger through there, and the engine still isn't on its roll stoppers, so there is a little bit more play there. I can dial in with the roll stoppers, but that looks pretty good. And even down the other side there, plenty of clearance there. That is looking pretty good. So, time to take the engine out again, and then I can tidy up the bulkhead. So we know that the engine will fit in the hole without folding up this lip, which is just fantastic. Then other than this tiny little cut here, from the top it's going to look pretty standard, which is really good. So I think the next thing to do is going to be to go over some of the slightly rough bits with some of the body filler, and then along the joins with the seam sealer, and that should hopefully then make all of this watertight again and I won't get wet feet. So this body filler is pretty easy to use. You put some of the filler down, a little bit of hardener, mix it up, and you've got 20 minutes or so in which to work with it. Spread it out nice and smooth, rub it back, see where you need to do it again, and then you just repeat that process over and over until you've got a nice smooth surface. So let's start by mixing a bit of this up and whacking it on. Right, well, the first coat of body filler is going off. I think it's time to turn our attention to the opposite end of the car and have a look in the boot, and I want to move the petrol tank. So as I said before, I want to move the petrol tank up to this edge of the boot to give me a little bit of luggage space at the back here. So that's going to mean that I'm going to need to make up some kind of platform in here for the tank to sit on, because it, with 60 litres of fuel in it, it's going to be pretty heavy. So a nice flat solid surface for it to sit on, and I need to get the fuel to the front of the car and then the return fuel back. So I've got a selection of holes already in the floor here, which were from when we were first building it and trying to figure out what to do with the brakes and clutch and all of that. So what I'm thinking is that I will take the fuel out through one of these holes, bring the return back, and then fill in the rest of the holes other than one, and I'll use one of them for the battery as well. Then I can come off of this level here with a flat platform to meet up with the front edge of the tank, down onto the floor, and that will give me a nice solid platform. Now the only other thing is that we've got this support here, which is what the rear of the diff carrier bolts up to, and these are what the original tank straps bolted onto. So these are going to need to come out probably, unless I can reuse them somehow. It would be useful to be able to get access to these, so I might drill a access hole in there, and I may even tack this on, but it's pretty rigid with it being bolted down. So I think the first thing is to get the tank in and have a quick measure up of what can go where, try to figure out the routing for the fuel pipes before I fabricate anything, see whether I can come straight up or whether I'm going to have to go across to one side, up and then back. Either way is fine. And it might even be easier to not use these holes at all and just make some new ones a bit further off to the edges. So if I just put that in there, it sits quite nicely, but it's really sloping, and that means all the fuel is going to pool here. I'll lose some capacity as well because the filler is here, and I'll lose all of this. So that's going to need to be straightened up. And about as far as we can get it is there. And I think that might be sitting over most of those holes at the back. So I'll find something suitable to prop in here and then take a look down the side and see how much space we've got. Okay, a piece of wood seems pretty good. Just got to remember that the car is sitting up on axle stands a little bit. Yeah, we've got a little bit of a height difference. I will use my spirit level to get an angle off of the boot floor, and then I can transpose that angle onto the tank, and then I'm assuming that Ford made the original floor pan pretty level with the rest of the car, so it's a good bet that taking this level, transposing it up to here, means that will give me a good level on the tank. Those of you who watch Project Binky will recognise this. I may not be able to make the noise, but I'll try. Okay, at the moment I've got a 2.2 degree, or 2.3 degree tilt on the boot floor. Yep, 2.2 degrees. And this has got quite a nice feature that you can do an alternative zero. So you can take a level, press a little button, and that will become 0. And then, okay, so we're now at 1.8 degrees. So this block of wood is a fraction too high. So we'll need it about there. make the noise. Okay, so about there is where I'm going to need it. Oh, that block of wood just tucked inside that channel there sits pretty nicely, and it's almost spot on. I've poked my phone down the back and I can see all of those holes down there, so that's looking pretty good. So what I think I need to do now is measure up a sheet of metal that can come from across the bottom, down, and then a little lip so that I can probably bolt it to the floor, because as I said, I want to be able to get to this diff carrier bolts just in case, although I might drill a hole in it. Decide when I get there whether I want to bolt it down or whether I want to weld it in. Obviously welding it in will be a lot stronger and will also help tie the back of the car together a bit better, or even stronger, so I might even weld it. So need to measure this and then get cutting and folding up some metal. And it's too wide to fit in the folder. It will sit between the edges, but these adjustments are in the way. Damn it, and I thought I'd measured that well. So we're going to have to do it a different way, which will probably be clamp it down to the workmate and then gradually tap it down along these two lines here, and that'll give a nice step on it, which will give it some strength in that direction, and then we'll need to figure out adding strength in that direction. Not bad, not bad. Still, however, a little bit flimsy in that direction. And normally when you've got a large panel like this, what you'd do is you would put swage lines into it. And that's usually done with a nice big machine with a couple of rollers. And you put a roller either side of the metal, clamp it down and roll the panel through. And that then rolls a nice bead into it, so we could put a couple across there and that will give loads of strength. I don't have one of those, so I'm going to have to improvise. And I'm going to make use of the workmate again. And basically I am going to place this down, close the workmate up a little bit, clamp it down, and then just hammer a line into this. It will give a little dip in it, and that should give some strength across the panel in that direction. And then when it's all bolted or welded in place, should be nice and stiff, and that will make a pretty good base for the fuel tank to sit on. So I'll figure out where I want to put my swages and how many of them. But before doing the swaging, I thought it might be a good idea to put it in the boot and see if it actually fits properly. And you know what, that looks pretty good. That isn't bad. So that sits nicely on this little ridge down here. So the existing swage that's in the boot floor, which so that's well supported all the way along that lip there. There's a small gap down the back that I can tuck some trim down at a later date. And that's sitting pretty centrally. Okay, so the only thing now is that these two back corners are sitting on the high bit at the side, but the middle has a dip. So I think what I'm going to need to do is put a swage in across that way, across the back, and that will stiffen up that back edge. And I might put a little support in the back there as well anyway, I might weld in a little support there. But we'll see how the swage goes. And then probably a couple, 2 or 3 down here to just stiffen it up in that direction. So I think first will be the one across the back, then we'll get it back in place and see how rigid it feels, and then see whether we need any more. So as I said, a swaging machine will make this job a lot easier, but I don't have the luxury of one of those yet. So that's the line that I'm going to swage. I'm going to wind this in, leave a gap of around a centimetre or 2. Okay, that might hold it a bit. Now comes the moment of truth. So I'm going to very slowly work my way along here, just gently pushing it down little bit by little bit. And even from just that, I can see and feel the strength coming into this panel now. So let's do a couple down here. That's added a load of strength into that. I will just need to knock that back flat because that's just raised this edge slightly. But yeah, a couple down the sides there and maybe one in the middle, and we are looking, I think we're going to be looking pretty good. Okay, not quite as pretty as if I'd have used a bead roller, but it has beads in it and that is a lot stiffer than it was. So let's go stick it back in the boot and see how it looks. Okay, so lined up with our marks, and yeah, still a little bit of play in that. But I think either just fold that down or just put a little support in there just to hold that, and that will then, once that's all welded in on those two corners there and down here, that will be much stiffer and looking pretty good. So I then need to figure out what I'm going to do about the stuff underneath, because I do want to weld this, so I think I'm probably going to have to put a couple of holes in here just to be able to get onto those bolts. Again, a really nice thing to do would be to put a little dimple hole, presser dip into this and then drill out the centre. I'm going to see whether I can replicate that with the tools I've got here and do it the DIY way again. Okay, so the next thing is going to be to put some holes in this, and I don't want to just drill a hole. I want to make it a little bit neater and also add a bit of strength into the panel at the same time. So the theory behind this will be I will use these two sockets. The larger of the two will go underneath the panel, and then the smaller one will be placed on top of the panel in line with the hole in the bigger socket underneath, and then as I tap down on the small socket on the top, that should push the steel down into the gap and make an indentation. Once that's down and I've got my little indentation, I can then drill my hole through the middle, and I've got a nice hole that's also strong, and that will give me good access to those bolts should I ever need to pull them out or get on top of them to hold them to tighten it up. So let's see how well this works. I've just put a light down there so that it will shine up through the middle of the socket, and I can line it up with the hole I've just drilled in there. About there. And then my other socket can go there. Might be easier just to hit it with a hammer. Yeah, easier to just hit it with the hammer. There we have one nice indented hole. I just need to repeat on the other side. Okay, that one drifted a fraction, but not far off. I then just need to drill that out to a slightly larger hole so that I can fit the appropriate size socket through. Okay, so we're back in, and can get onto those two bolts through there. So I'm pretty happy with that. There's still just a little bit of wobbling across that back edge there. That's not too bad, but I think what I might be able to do is just fold a little lip along the edge here and along the back edge here. That will just strengthen up the edge of the panel, because I don't really want that sinking down. So yeah, I'll just quickly fold an edge into these and I'll be right back. Okay, so I've just very quickly folded in, just using a pair of mole grips, a lip around those edges, and that is now sitting in there quite nicely. I think once these two corners are tacked in, that should take quite a bit of that movement out of there, and if not, I can just put a couple of little supports down, but I think overall that should hold that tank really rather nicely. And then the next thing is going to be to figure out what I'm going to do about the fuel lines running down the car. I don't really want to be drilling any more holes, and it would be nice to fill in some holes. So I think what I might do is pick the two most appropriate holes out of these, and then, or three, because I also want the battery cable to go through that way. So pick the three most appropriate holes for these, figure out whether I'm going to row the fuel round this way, or even both, maybe feed one way, return the other. I've got to fit in along here somewhere the fuel filter and a non-return valve, because I was having the fuel pressure disappearing with ignition off, which sometimes made cranking a little bit difficult. So I've got a one-way valve to hopefully try to stop that. So I need to figure out where those are going to go, what route they're going to take, where the battery cable is going to go, and then fill in the holes there that I'm not going to be using. Okay, I have here a AN-6 and -4 bulkhead fitting. So these are common aeromotive, automotive, motorsport parts. They come in various different sizes, and in theory they're all cross-compatible with each other. But I've bought all of these things from one supplier, so I know that they should definitely be compatible. So the -6 is going to be for fuel feed, and the -4 for return. Now, I think we could probably do something like that, and then use one of these other holes for the battery cable to go through. So these AN fittings come in a variety of different shapes. So we have a straight, that is 45 degrees. And 90 degrees. The general consensus is the further it bends, the more expensive it costs. So that 90 degree is about twice the cost of this straight one. So unless you really need to go round very tight bends with an angled, it's a lot cheaper to use the straight ones and then make your bend out of hose. So that's what I'm going to try to do. I've got more of these than I have those, and if I need more, these are obviously a lot cheaper to buy. Okay, so that very abstract photo. And you can see that there's quite a bit of gap there, and I can always just bring the tank forward just a fraction. Okay, so I think there is going to be enough space there to wriggle a pipe through, probably even off that straight connector, but I may put an angled one in, because then rather than it coming up sort of slightly like that towards the front of the car, I can put an angle in it and sort of take it off sideways, and then the angle that it's leaning over from vertical isn't quite as important. So I think what we need to do now is clean up this floor, weld up some of those other holes that I'm not going to be using. Right, I've just cut out a load of little circular discs, which I'm going to use to fill in these holes at the back. And then we have most of those holes filled. So one for fuel feed, one for fuel return, and one for battery. The next thing I think will be to think about welding the rest of it in. I think I might still tie this into the floor a bit here, just to add a little bit of extra rigidity. Don't think it's really needed, but while I'm here, why not? Okay, I've ran out of storage space on the camera, so didn't get me tack welding this in. I think I'm going to leave it pretty much as is. I don't see any point at the moment in fully welding it down. It's pretty solid. And as I said, I've run out of space on the memory card, and I've also run out of time. So that'll be all for today. So thank you for watching, and join me next time when I'll do some more stuff on this fuel tank and the fuel system, and a bit more on the front end. Thanks for watching. Bye.